It's official, we have an election on our hands. Simon Harris has gone to the Áras and the Dáil is dissolved. We're going to go through what the state of the parties is like looking ahead to this campaign. I'm joined by Irish Independent's political editor Philip Ryan and Ireland editor Fianna Fáil. Philip, I might start with yourself. The task that Simon Harris has on hand now, a lot of incumbent TDs, of course, are not running. How big do you think the challenge really is for Simon Harris?
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge on that front, that he's lost 18 TDs who are outgoing TDs who would have been in with a good chance of taking seats. Some people who had a very strong voter base, people who have been there many, many terms, and some who are quite young, which has surprised others. So look, that is his big challenge going in there. A lot of fresh faces, a lot of politicians or potential politicians who the electorate mightn't know as well, but probably he will be happy enough with the opinion polls. He will be happy that he has brought the party out of kind of the doldrums that Leo Varadkar had them in, and he does stand every chance of returning to government after the general election.
And Fianna, when we compare Simon Harris as a leader, there has been some talk that he's a little bit like Bertie Ahern, perhaps. When you compare him to Leo Varadkar, he does have a little bit more energy. Do you think that is going to translate in keeping those seats that incumbents currently occupy? And maybe do you have any examples of seats that now are lost because those incumbents are not running again?
Yeah, well, one of the criticisms of Leo Varadkar was that he wanted a single transferable type of candidate. Everybody had to be a mirror image of him. But actually, when you look at the lineup of Fine Gael candidates, particularly the new people, there's a good old variation there. You know, I'm not just talking about gender quotas, but ages, backgrounds, and so on. So it didn't seem to be that same desire to have somebody who was just perfectly aligned with Leo, and hence the party got accused of being the posh boys, because there seemed to be an aura around Leo Varadkar that everybody had to be of a particular status within society. Harris, given his background, certainly brings along a different mix. It seems that Fine Gael are entirely banking the whole campaign on Simon Harris will win it first. Bertie Ahern, you can argue, was of the same ilk at the time when he became Taoiseach back in '97. He was a young leader for a young country. He was famously the Prince of Darkness. There was this great image of him with a black background. And they ran a very presidential style campaign around him, and it worked for them back then. Fine Gael are looking back towards the Gareth Fitzgerald era now. No, Simon Harris, he's no Gareth Fitzgerald in terms of intellectual and policy depth, but they just feel there's a popularity often that people like him, and that they can build upon that. As you say, you look around the country, you look at 43 different constituencies, and you say, look, results are going to be different no matter what. And regardless of who the leader is, you can pick places like Donegal, like North Tipperary, like Fingal North, where you're looking at it going, there want to be a really high Harris swing here now. We're not just talking about the Harris hop. We'd want to be doing the really getting the high jump, the Harris leap, in order to get them up to that level. And that's going to be the difficulty that they ultimately have, that they're entirely reliant upon. The national vote is going to carry people across the line. Worked for Mary Lou 5 years ago, though.
I think in the modern era as well, we have, when campaigns are so much based around media, and that is probably his key advantage as well. When it comes to debates, he's going to perform quite well. When it comes to the one-on-one interviews, whether it be with ourselves or other media outlets, that's where he kind of has the advantage on some of his opponents. And perhaps when those debates kick in, and we know they do have some form of influence over the outcome, that people for the first time who may have not cared about politics for the last, 50 years of the year, that they come and they'll watch that and they go, oh, that guy's actually all right, and he seems to know his brief and he can give a good soundbite, and that might bring them over the line there.
If you look at how he's framed it as well, he wants a short, sharp election campaign. He doesn't want it dragging on. He hasn't gone for the maximum length. So they talk about a ground war or an air war, and during the summer you tend to have a ground war. You have longer nights, you can canvass more, and so on. An air war is you take it to the media. We also know he's basically the most effective politician we have in this country in social media terms. He is very much representative of a new generation there. So we know that they are the areas that he is going to be strong, because ultimately, from the Fine Gael organisation perspective, after 15 years in office and with half your teeth going out the door, that's weak.
And ultimately, that's social media presence is really important, especially for that young voter and maybe perhaps even that floating voter. If you look at this time 4 years ago, Sinn Féin obviously did very well, and we were for quite a while ourselves in the media and also in those political circles certainly expecting that it would be nearly a sure bet that Sinn Féin would be in government next time around. That's not as sure now, Philip.
No, it doesn't look like that. They've had a terrible and atrocious past 2 months. We have had this endless stream of controversies about their TDs, their former politicians, their press office. It's wall to wall. We have Mary Lou up in the Dáil twice in 2 weeks apologising to people and making statements about how she has performed in this cover-up, essentially, of Niall O'Donnell's behaviour towards a teenager, a 16-year-old kid. So look, that's all hanging over them going into this election campaign. It's very different to the last one. Now, they didn't go into the last one thinking that they were going to do so well. They know that themselves. The pension age was the catalyst there for them to bounce back. People that exercise people during the campaign. We don't really know what will be the issue that will exercise people in this election campaign or where people will stand on it so far. But it certainly won't have helped Sinn Féin in any way to give people this idea that they are incompetent or they are competent of running a government if their own party, their own internal structures are so badly damaged.
I suppose that's the difference between now and 5 years ago. You could look at this election and go, well, we're in the exact same position we were 5 years ago. Sinn Féin had had a bad local and European elections. They were struggling at the time. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael were looking like they were going to be the parties on the rise, and they would go in with whoever shaped up in the rest. You don't know how the election campaign dynamic is going to change. What we do know though this time is that Sinn Féin aren't going to be coming from nowhere. People know an awful lot more about them. They have come under a lot more scrutiny, a lot more focus, a lot more attention over the course of the 5 years. So that kind of floating voter that they got last time, that were moving instinctively towards them, that's not going to occur as firmly this time around, no matter how good the campaign goes for them.
And when you look at some of the other opposition parties, I mean, that floating voter may perhaps, do you think, go from Sinn Féin to Social Democrats or Labour? Even if you look at the Green Party, they, the junior coalition partner, they may not do maybe as well as they're hoping. They didn't have a good local or European election. So who do you think will benefit from the floating voter this time around?
That's why the campaign does actually matter, that dynamic of who is prioritising what issues. And it is difficult for the smaller parties to get a look in that regard, in terms of getting that airtime to get your message out there. You can be reliant upon just something like a catchphrase or something that you say in a debate, that suddenly people start going, oh, I like the sound of that, and it can basically put the spotlight back on you, and then you've got to run with it. And that's what each of the party leaders is going to be trying to do over the course of the coming weeks. Because there's definitely a voter out there this time that's looking for somewhere to go. They were going with Sinn Féin up until about 18 months ago, we were seeing in the polls. Some have drifted. There has been some drift back towards Fine Gael. Still not that dramatic though. Ultimately, we're not backing into Kenny territory here of high 30s or anything even resembling that. So there is still that cohort of 5 to 7% of the voters, people who will actually vote, who are still looking for a home.
There was a fear, though, wasn't there, that Social Democrats, Labour, maybe even the Greens to an extent, would be cannibalised by Sinn Féin in the occasion that they return as good of a vote as they did 4 years ago. That fear doesn't seem to be really there, Philip, does it?
No, it wouldn't have been the same, and I think Fianna Fáil were obviously had been cannibalised and would have feared that they would have been cannibalised further from Sinn Féin in the coming election. But again, that fear won't be as strong now. The left vote is interesting. The People for Profit, Solidarity are out again looking for the vote left, transfer left. That has saw some of them get elected over time. In the last election especially, you had a lot of the left-wing candidates getting over the line on the back of all those big transfers for Sinn Féin. That's not going to happen this time. It'll be interesting to see where that left vote goes. Have the public forgiven the Labour Party after 13, 14 years? Is Social Democrat the brand that people want to see? Is Holly Cairns the new face of the left as such? And that's the questions that will have to be seen. I don't see them coming back as a major voting bloc together, that would, and even if they did, they wouldn't combine, because it's just the left can't combine. It just doesn't seem to be possible.
This unity that you have on the left is to the centre and the centre right's advantage. What we're looking at in this general election is, again, there'll be a solid trend of Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil transferring to each other, and that does matter in terms of your final seats in 4 and 5 seat constituencies. Who wins them? If you have something that can, some solid block of vote that can swing towards you, and the lack of a coherent message on the left to transfer between each other, it does them damage. And that, you know, they're each trying to carve out their own niche in the market, but at the same time, the vote left, stay left is a good message for them to be putting out there.
But they might actually have more power if they were to, for example, Social Democrats and Labour, to finally get together and form maybe one party.
They need to realise the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, at the moment they're looking at each other, saying there's just this cohort of people who are going to vote in our space, and we need to go after their votes, number one, when in fact they should realise there's a broader pie here.
And just to finish on Fianna Fáil, obviously Micheál Martin has been leader for a very long time. It's not his first time at the rodeo. He does seem to be in a good place. There was perhaps very small rumblings of a heave. They never really materialised. Fianna Fáil isn't doing fantastic in the polls, but they maintain that the polls are wrong and they're actually in sort of mid-20s, early 20s party. How do you think they're fixed?
Well, the opinion polls certainly appear to underestimate where Fianna Fáil are and where their standing is as a party. You only have to look at the local elections and the European elections, where they did very well. And like Fionn just said, a part of that was to do with the transfer between the two grand coalition or civil war parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. I would think that Micheál Martin will perform better than expected in this election, and that Fianna Fáil aren't at the 18% mark. They're probably at a little bit higher, but a lot will depend on those transfers. He's also going in with a team of mostly faces that people know, like a lot of outgoing TDs are running again for their second, third, fourth terms, and that people know, people are aware of. They've dealt with them over the years. They've had help from them. He has some noticeable outgoing people as well. You have the MEPs who got elected, of course, during the summer, that they have to be replaced. Some big names like the Cowan family. There'll be no Cowan on the ballot sheet this time round for the first time in a long, long time. So there's elements like that will have to be addressed. But I think Micheál, generally a good debater as well. It depends on how the public feel at him at this stage. I think there is a view out there that he is a kind of the safe pair of hands that can run the country without too much trouble or too much angst or controversy. He never seems to be engulfed in any significant controversy. Perhaps his TDs and things are, but not himself. So look, I would predict he'd have a solid enough election with enough TDs to be in the conversation for a coalition after the vote.
They're very much, unlike Fine Gael, they have a very stable lineup. They're very comfortable with the selections that they have around the country. They have put themselves in a position now where if they get the bounce of the ball at all, then suddenly they're looking at Clare, Carroll Kilkenny, Kerry, Donegal, Dublin Rathdown. They're looking at Louth, places they can pick up seats handy enough. Yeah, they'll lose some elsewhere, but yeah, they are reliant upon that national bounce for them. Didn't go their way at all. It was calamitous last time. You look back this time 5 years ago, everybody was expecting Fianna Fáil would emerge firmly as the largest party. So again, the campaign dynamic does actually matter. But Micheál Martin seems to be far more comfortable in his skin and where exactly he's at compared to Simon Harris.
Okay, so Philip, the independents may well be a smaller third leg of a coalition if we're going to see one next time around. They're a bit more finicky to deal with in government formation talks, but how are they fixed during the general election campaign?
Look, independent TDs have been part of Irish governments going back to the 40s. It's part of our institution. It's where people seem to turn when they have had enough of the established parties, when they don't see a reasonable voice in the opposition. They go, look, let's try this independent guy, a local guy, probably know them, probably dealt with them as well, who knows. But we've seen in 2016 that if they come together and form some form of kind of alliance, as in the Independent Alliance, they can be a bloc within a new Dáil, and they can influence government and in fact be in it. And like we've seen it back in the days under Fianna Fáil when Bertie Ahern relied on independents to form governments. It's just part of the fabric of how our parliament works and has been. We've seen in the polls, as people probably you know, when the independent or the Sinn Féin vote collapsed, a lot of it is going towards independence. You have this Independent Ireland alliance running, who will have probably in around 20-30 candidates. I'm not sure how professional of an organisation it is to get.
There's no whip system, of course.
There's no whip system, so that'll make it difficulty to be a government partner. They're also going into an election as a new political party, but without the funding that established parties have, which makes it very difficult to do and very difficult to make an impact. And that's going to be a huge problem for them. But you are going to have the usual independents, your Healy Rays, the Maddie McGraths, the Noel Grealishes. They'll all come, they'll all walk back in and represent their communities in the Dáil. What they get for their communities in the long run, it's hard to tell. And perhaps it'll be some deals just to have support during budgets and things like that. But I do see a big swath of independents coming back after this general election.
And the big issue will be, we focus so much on the rural independents. Actually, will there be the rise of the urban independent in this general election? You know, we have traditionally one of the most famous independents was the late Tony Gregory and the Gregory deal that he struck back in the 80s. Then Fianna McGrath and Shane Ross went into cabinet as independent TDs. There's a whole batch of constituencies in Dublin, all the way from Dublin right down up to Dublin Fingal, and plenty of spots in between where you'd say there's gaps in the market there where there are strong independent candidates and they could quite conceivably get a foothold in this election.
And they are seen as more of a friendly face, aren't they? Perhaps if you've been disappointed by the opposition, maybe you don't really understand what the left says, you know, you might know the independent candidate, maybe they've been there a long time, maybe they've been able to get a pothole fixed for you. That's really the stuff that kind of wins the votes at the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, there are established names there who have shown they have a track record at county council level, so they're not complete new guys who are arriving onto the pitch and just hoping to get swept up in an independent wave. They're people who have a foothold in communities.
My thanks to Fianna Sheehan and Philip Ryan. Make sure to follow the Irish Independent for all the latest coverage on election 2024.